Captain Jake stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. His hands gripped the metal rail as he thought about what lay ahead. The ship around him was huge and powerful, but Jake felt small when he thought about the mission they were about to begin. "Captain," said Lisa Park, walking up behind him. She was the ship's science officer and one of the people Jake had ever met. "I've been looking at the old records again. Are you sure we're ready for this?" Jake turned to face her. Lisa's face showed worry, but her eyes were determined. They had all been preparing for this moment their whole lives. Their parents had prepared for it. Their grandparents had prepared for it. In fact, humans had been preparing for this day for 500,000 years. "Tell me the story again, Lisa," Jake said quietly. "I want to hear it one more time before we begin." Lisa nodded and pulled up a chair. Around them, the other crew members stopped their work to listen. They all knew the story by heart, but they never got tired of hearing it. It was their story. It was why they were here. "It started back in the year 2387, Lisa began. "Earth had just learned how to travel between the stars. We were so excited to meet other life in the universe. We thought we would make friends and learn new things." She touched a button on her tablet and showed a picture of an old spaceship. It looked tiny compared to their current vessel. "Commander Alex Turner led our first mission to deep space. His ship was called the Pioneer. It had a crew of 200 people, all volunteers. They were the bravest humans alive back then." Jake had seen Alex Turner's picture many times. The man had short brown hair and kind eyes. He looked like someone you could trust, someone who believed the best about people. The Pioneer traveled for 3 months before they found signs of alien life. When they did, everyone on Earth celebrated. We were not alone in the universe. Commander Turner sent a message back to Earth saying they had found a great alien empire called the... Lisa's voice grew darker as she continued the story. "At first, they seemed friendly. They invited the Pioneer to their space station. Commander Turner and his crew went aboard, hoping to start a friendship between our species." The bridge was completely quiet now. Everyone knew what came next. They were not interested in friendship. They looked at humans and saw only weak animals. They thought we were so primitive that we did not deserve to live. Without any warning, they killed Commander Turner and his entire crew. Jake closed his eyes. He had heard this part of the story 1,000 times, but it still made him angry. "But that was just the beginning," Lisa continued. "They decided that all humans needed to die. They followed the Pioneer's path back to our colonies. They had ships that were faster and stronger than anything we had ever built." She showed another picture on her tablet. This one showed a human colony on a distant world. Green fields, small towns, families living peaceful lives. The first attack came at New Boston Colony. 5,000 humans lived there, including many children. The ships arrived without warning. They destroyed everything. Every building, every farm, every person. Jake's great-great-great-grandfather had lived on New Boston Colony. He had been only 6 years old when they came. "The attacks continued for 2 years, Lisa said. Mars Colony, Europa Station, the mining bases in the asteroid belt. One by one, they destroyed every human settlement they could find. We tried to fight back, but our weapons were useless against their technology." She showed a picture of Earth from space. Even in the old image, you could see the scars where weapons had burned the surface. Finally, they came for Earth itself. 3 billion humans lived on our home world. The leader, Emperor, sent a message before the attack. He said humans were a disease that needed to be removed from the galaxy. Jake remembered learning about Emperor in school. The alien leader was cruel beyond imagination. He collected the skulls of different species as trophies. The battle for Earth lasted 1 week. Our space fleet was destroyed in the first day. The ships surrounded our planet and began attacking from orbit. Cities burned. Forests turned to ash. The oceans began to boil. Lisa paused and looked around at the crew. They were all thinking the same thing. How had humanity survived such destruction? But humans are hard to kill, she continued with a small smile. A few thousand people escaped in old cargo ships and mining vessels. They were led by a woman named Kate and a man named Adams. These survivors flew to the darkest parts of space where they would not look for them. Jake had pictures of Kate and Adams in his quarters. They were the reason any humans were still alive. The thought they had won. They believed every human was dead, emperor or celebrated by adding Earth to his collection of destroyed worlds. They never bothered to check if any humans had escaped. Lisa stood up and looked out at the stars. That was 500,000 years ago. Since then, we have been preparing, learning, growing stronger. They forgot about us, but we never forgot about them. Jake nodded slowly. On the wall nearby was a memorial with millions of names on it. Every human who had died in the attack was remembered. His own ancestor, Danny, was listed there. Danny had been a soldier who died defending the children at Mars Colony. And now, Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Lisa smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for justice. Now we go back. The Empire still rules most of the galaxy. They still keep slaves and destroy anyone who opposes them. They think they are safe because they believe humans are extinct. Jake looked at his crew, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were stronger, smarter, and more determined than any humans who had ever lived. But they were still human. They still felt love and pain and anger. They're about to learn, Jake said quietly, that humans never forget. Dr. Emma Hayes looked at the small group of humans sitting in front of her. There were only 12,000 of them left in the entire universe. They had been hiding in the Void Nebula for 50 years now, and Emma could see the fear in their eyes every day. "We cannot stay weak," Emma told the council. "They destroyed us because we were not strong enough to fight back. If we want to survive, we must become better." Kate, the leader of the survivors, nodded slowly. She was an old woman now, but her eyes still burned with anger when she thought about what they had done to Earth. "What do you suggest, Dr. Hayes?" Kate asked. Emma stood up and walked to the front of the room. Behind her was a large screen showing pictures of human DNA. "We must change ourselves, not just our bodies but our minds. We need to become stronger, faster, smarter, but we must never lose what makes us human." Adams, the military leader, frowned. "You want to experiment on our own people?" "I want to give our children the tools they need to win," Emma replied. "They think they are better than us because they are stronger. We will show them that humans can be strong too." Over the next 100 years, Emma's team worked carefully to improve humanity. They made human bones stronger than steel. They made human muscles faster than any machine. They made human brains able to think faster and remember more. But the most important change was not in their bodies. Emma made sure that humans could still feel love, anger, hope, and sadness. She knew that these feelings were what made humans special. Ben Cooper was one of the first children born with the new improvements. He grew up to be 7 feet tall with silver eyes that could see in the dark. But when he smiled, he looked just like any human child. "We are still human," Ben would tell his own children years later. "We are just better humans." While Emma worked on improving people, other survivors worked on building new technology. Carl Brooks was a scientist who had escaped from Mars Colony. He spent his entire life studying weapons that had been left behind after the attacks. "Their technology is powerful," Carl explained to his team, "but it is not perfect. They rely too much on their strength and not enough on their brains." Carl's team learned to build weapons that could bend space and time. They created ships that could appear and disappear like ghosts. They invented armor that could stop any weapon. But building the technology was not enough. The humans needed to build a fleet of ships strong enough to challenge the Empire. This job fell to Admiral Ben Cooper, the same boy who had grown up with Emma's improvements. Ben was now a man of 40, but he looked like he was 20. The genetic changes made humans age much slower than before. He stood in the center of a huge construction site hidden deep in the Void Nebula. "How many ships do we have now?" Ben asked his assistant, Amy Foster. Amy looked at her reports. She was a general who had been training human soldiers for 30 years. "We have completed 800 ships so far, Admiral, but we need at least 10,000 to match the fleet." Ben nodded. "Then we keep building, we have time. They think we are extinct. They are not looking for us." And they were right. The Empire had grown even larger in the years since they destroyed humanity. Emperor Ornau ruled over 1,000 different species across the galaxy. He sat on his crystal throne and believed that his empire would last forever. The Emperor had forgotten about humans completely. When his advisors brought him reports of strange ships in the outer regions, he dismissed them as unimportant. "Probably just pirates or rebels," the Emperor would say. "Send a patrol ship to deal with them." But the humans were careful. Whenever ships came near their hidden bases, the humans would disappear like smoke. They had learned to be patient in ways that they could never understand. Helen Clark was the keeper of human history during these long years of preparation. She made sure that every human child learned about what they had done. She kept records of every crime, every species they had enslaved, every world they had destroyed. "We must never forget," Helen would tell her students. "If we forget our history, we become no better than the." Helen's records grew into a massive library. She documented not just human suffering, but the suffering of all species under rule. She wanted to make sure that when humans finally returned, they would fight for everyone who had been hurt by the Empire. The years passed slowly. 100 years became 200. 200 became 500. Human children grew up, had children of their own, and died of old age without ever seeing their home world. But they never stopped preparing. Each generation was stronger and smarter than the last. Each generation built better ships and better weapons. Each generation passed down the story of what they had done. By the year 2847, humans had changed in ways that would have amazed their ancestors. They were still recognizably human, but they were also something more. They could live for thousands of years. They could think faster than any computer. They could fight with the strength of 10 men. Most importantly, they had learned to work together in ways that no other species could match. 500,000 years of shared suffering had taught them that they were stronger together than apart. Captain Jake was a product of all this preparation. His body was perfect, his mind was sharp, and his heart burned with the same anger that had kept humans alive for 500,000 years. "Are we ready?" Admiral Cooper asked him on the day before their first mission. Jake looked out at the massive fleet of human ships. Each one was more powerful than anything that had ever built. But more than that, each ship was crewed by humans who remembered every detail of what had been taken from them. "We are ready," Jake replied. "They are about to learn that humans never forget and never give up." The time for hiding was over. The time for revenge had finally come. Security Chief was having a boring day at Prime. The mining world was one of thousands in the Empire, and nothing interesting ever happened there. Slaves dug rare metals from the ground while guards watched them work. Was reading reports about production numbers when every screen in his control room suddenly went black. Emergency lights began flashing red. "What is happening?" shouted at his technicians. "I don't know, sir," replied his assistant. "All our sensors stopped working at the same time." Had been a security chief for 200 years. He had never seen anything like this before. They had the best technology in the galaxy. Their sensors could detect a single ship from 1,000 light years away. "Get the sensors back online now," he ordered. It took his technicians 5 minutes to restart the systems. When the screens came back to life, his blood turned cold. 50 massive ships surrounded Prime. They were unlike anything he had ever seen before. The ships were black as space itself and covered with strange blue lights. They moved without making any sound, gliding through space like deadly fish swimming in an ocean. "Where did they come from?" whispered. Before anyone could answer, a message appeared on every screen in the system. A human face looked out at them. The alien had pale skin, dark hair, and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. "This is Captain Jake of the United Earth Forces," the human said. His voice was calm and quiet, but somehow more frightening than any scream. "You have 30 minutes to evacuate all non-combatants from this system. After that, we will demonstrate what 500,000 years of preparation looks like." Stared at the screen in shock. Humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. The great emperor had destroyed them all 500,000 years ago. "This is impossible," said. "Humans are dead, we killed them all." But even as he spoke, he was calling for help. General K commanded the defense fleet for this sector. He had 200 warships under his command. General K arrived within an hour. He was a veteran warrior who had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. When he saw the human ships on his screens, he laughed. 50 ships against my 200, K said. "These mammals must be insane." He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "I am General K of the Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Captain's face appeared on the screen again. This time he was not alone. Behind him stood other humans, all wearing black uniforms with strange symbols. "General K said, "You have 15 minutes to evacuate all slaves and civilian workers from Prime. After that, anyone who remains will be considered an enemy combatant." K's face turned purple with rage. No one had ever spoken to a general like this before. "I will crush you like the insects you are," K snarled. "All ships attack formation. Destroy these primitive animals." The fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Their ships were huge and powerful, armed with weapons that could destroy entire planets. K had used this same fleet to conquer 12 different species. But as soon as the battle began, K knew something was terribly wrong. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen before. They seemed to phase in and out of reality, appearing behind his ships before disappearing again. Weapons fired at empty space, while human weapons struck with perfect accuracy. "What kind of technology is this?" K screamed at his officers. One of his ships exploded in a ball of blue fire, then another, then 10 more. The human weapons cut through armor like it was made of paper. Captain's ship, the UES Vengeance, appeared directly in front of K's flagship. For a moment, the two ships faced each other in space. Then the Vengeance fired a single shot. K's ship broke in half like a toy. The general barely had time to reach an escape pod before his flagship was destroyed. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, only 5 ships remained out of 200. They floated in space, their engines dead, their weapons destroyed. Opened a channel to the surviving ships. "You will return to your empire and deliver a message. Tell them that humanity has returned. Tell them we remember every world you destroyed, every life you took, every crime you committed. Tell them we are coming for all of you." The ships fled as fast as they could, carrying news of humanity's return to the farthest corners of the empire. On Prime, human soldiers were already landing. Commander Lucy Martinez led the ground forces as they secured the mining facilities. What they found there made even these hardened warriors angry. The mines were full of slaves from dozens of different species. Men, women, and children worked in terrible conditions, digging rare metals for their masters. Many were sick and injured. Some had been slaves for their entire lives. "Get medical teams down here immediately," Lucy ordered. "I want every slave treated and evacuated to safety." The human soldiers worked through the night. freeing thousands of slaves and providing medical care. They had brought enough ships to transport every freed prisoner to neutral space where they would be safe. One of the slaves, a young girl from a species called the, looked up at Lucy with wonder. "Are you really humans?" the girl asked. "They told us humans were monsters that ate children." Lucy knelt down beside the girl and smiled. "We are humans, and we promise you that no one will hurt you ever again." As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, something amazing began to happen. Species that had been enslaved for thousands of years started to hope. Rebel groups that had been hiding in the shadows began to plan attacks on their oppressors. The Empire, meanwhile, was in chaos. Emperor Or had not believed the first reports of humanity's return. Now he could not deny what was happening. "How is this possible?" the Emperor raged at his advisors. "We destroyed them all. I saw their world burn with my own eyes." His military commanders had no answers. The humans had technology that was far beyond anything they possessed. Worse, they seemed to know everything about defenses and tactics. "They have been watching us," one advisor suggested. "For how long we do not know." Emperor Or looked out at his vast empire and realized for the first time in his long life that he might actually be in danger. The humans had returned, and they were nothing like the weak species he had destroyed so long ago. Captain stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and watched as the last transport ship left Prime. Every slave had been freed. Every facility had been destroyed. It was a good start, but it was only the beginning. "Where do we go next, Captain?" asked Lisa Park. Jake looked at the star maps showing thousands of worlds. Each one represented more slaves to free, more crimes to punish, more justice to deliver. "Everywhere," he said simply. "We go everywhere." Emperor Or sat on his crystal throne and tried to control his anger. The news from Prime had reached every corner of his empire. Humans were alive, and they had destroyed an entire fleet in minutes. "This cannot be allowed to continue," the Emperor said to his war council. "We must crush these insects before they inspire our slaves to rebel." War Marshal stepped forward. He was the Emperor's most trusted general, a warrior who had conquered 50 different worlds. His body was covered in scars from 1,000 battles. "My Emperor said, I have studied the reports from Prime. These humans have new technology, but they are still just mammals. I request permission to take the 5th Imperial Fleet and hunt them down." The Emperor nodded slowly. The 5th Imperial Fleet was his strongest force, with 5,000 warships. It had never been defeated in battle. "Take whatever you need," the Emperor ordered. "Find these humans and destroy them all. This time make sure none escape." But what the Emperor did not know was that Admiral Ben Cooper had been waiting for exactly this response. Deep in space, hidden human listening posts had been monitoring communications for centuries. They knew about the 5th Imperial Fleet before it even left port. Ben stood in the command center of the secret base called Haven. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the galaxy. "Activate Protocol Omega," Ben ordered. Across the galaxy, human agents who had been sleeping for decades suddenly woke up. Ships that looked like dead asteroids powered up their engines. Space stations that appeared to be ancient ruins revealed themselves to be deadly weapons platforms. They had no idea that humans had been preparing for this war for 500,000 years. Every star system had been scouted. Every base had been mapped. Every weakness had been found and recorded. Captain received his new orders while his fleet was traveling between systems. They were to hit the prison world called Torment, where they conducted their worst experiments on captured beings. "How many prisoners are on Torment?" asked Lisa Park. Lisa checked her files. Intelligence reports say over 1 million beings from 300 different species. They have been using them for medical experiments for the past 1,000 years. Felt his anger grow cold and hard. They were not just conquerors. They were monsters who enjoyed causing pain. Colonel Rivers called to his ground forces commander. "I want every prisoner freed and every facility destroyed. Show no mercy to anyone who has hurt the innocent." Colonel Sam Rivers was a tall man with gray eyes and hands that never shook. He had trained his entire life to fight and he was very good at his job. "Understood, Captain," Rivers replied. "My teams are ready." The attack on Torment began at dawn. Human ships appeared around the planet like ghosts materializing from thin air. The defenders never had a chance to send a distress signal before their communication arrays were destroyed. Rivers led his soldiers through the prison facilities with surgical precision. They moved through the corridors like death itself, eliminating guards and freeing prisoners. The scientists who had tortured innocent beings for sport found no mercy from the human soldiers. What Rivers found in the deepest levels of the prison made him sick with rage. Children from dozens of species were being used as test subjects for weapons. Some had been experimented on since birth and had never seen sunlight. "Get medical teams down here now," Rivers ordered, "and prepare transport ships for immediate evacuation." Doctor arrived with her medical teams within hours. She was a specialist in trauma recovery who had spent her life developing new ways to heal psychological wounds. Her teams had studied every form of torture they used, and they knew how to help the victims recover. "These people have been through hell," told Rivers as she examined the prisoners. "But humans understand survival better than any other species. We can help them heal." The liberation of Torment was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, human forces struck at installations with perfect coordination. Slave worlds were freed, prison ships were captured, military bases were destroyed. They tried to fight back, but they were unprepared for this kind of warfare. Their enemies seemed to know exactly where to hit and when. Every time they sent a fleet to defend one world, the humans would attack 3 others. War Marshal found his 5th Imperial Fleet scattered across 50 different battle zones. Every time he tried to concentrate his forces, the humans would disappear and attack somewhere else. "How are they doing this?" demanded of his intelligence officers. "How do they know our every move?" The truth was simple but terrifying. Humans had been watching the Empire for centuries. They knew the location of every ship, the identity of every commander, the weakness of every defense. They were fighting an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves. Meanwhile, something else was happening across the galaxy. The freed slaves were not just running away to safety. Many of them were joining the human cause, offering to fight alongside their liberators. Captain found himself commanding not just human ships, but vessels crewed by dozens of different species. All of them had one thing in common: they had suffered under rule, and they wanted justice. A young alien named approached after the liberation of his home world. People had been slaves for 3,000 years. Captain said, "My people want to join your fight. We know we are not as strong as humans, but we can still help." Looked at the alien warrior. Was small and thin, but his eyes burned with the same determination that saw in human faces. "We welcome all who fight for freedom," replied. "But remember, we do not fight for revenge alone. We fight to make sure this never happens again." Emperor or watched his empire crumble from his throne room. Reports came in every hour of new defeats, new rebellions, new worlds lost to the human alliance. His greatest generals were dead or missing. His most secure prison worlds had been liberated. "How many ships do we have left?" the emperor asked his remaining advisor. The advisor looked afraid to answer. "Less than half of our original fleet, my emperor. The humans seem to be everywhere at once." The emperor stood up from his throne for the first time in centuries. His crystal palace, built from the bones of conquered worlds, suddenly felt very small and fragile. "Recall all forces to Prime," he ordered. "If these humans want a final battle, they will have one." But Admiral Ben Cooper was already planning for that final confrontation. Every human ship in the galaxy was moving toward the home world. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years was about to face its judgment day. The reckoning had spread across the stars, and soon it would reach the very heart of the empire. Prime had never looked more beautiful or more doomed. The home world of the empire glowed like a dark jewel in space, surrounded by massive defense stations and protected by reality-bending shields. Emperor, or had gathered every remaining ship in his empire around his throne world for one final battle. Captain Jake stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance as his fleet approached the enemy formation. Behind him were not just human ships, but vessels from every species that had enslaved. The Liberation Fleet stretched across space like a river of stars, all united in their desire for justice. "How many ships does the Emperor have left?" asked Lisa Park. Lisa studied her sensors carefully. 8,000 warships, Captain, plus the planetary defense systems. It will be their strongest force yet. Nodded. It was fitting that the final battle would be the hardest one. They would fight desperately to protect their home world, just as humans had fought to protect Earth 500,000 years ago. Admiral Cooper said into his communication device, "Are all forces in position?" Ben Cooper's voice came back strong and clear. "All human fleets report ready, Jake. The freed species are also in position. This is it." On Prime, Emperor stood in his war room surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching enemy fleet. His advisors looked terrified, but the Emperor's face showed only cold rage. "They dare to bring their mongrel alliance to my home world," the Emperor snarled. "Today we will show them why they have ruled the galaxy for millions of years." War Marshal, one of the few generals still alive, stepped forward. Half his face was covered in bandages from his last battle with human forces. "My Emperor," said, "perhaps we should consider negotiation. The humans have proven to be more dangerous than we anticipated." The Emperor's eyes flashed with fury. "Negotiation? With mammals? I would rather see this empire burn than bow to inferior species." Suddenly, every screen in the war room flickered and changed. Captain's face appeared, looking directly at the Emperor with eyes that burned like cold fire. "Emperor Orr," said, his voice carrying the weight of 500,000 years of preparation. "I am Captain Jake, heir to the legacy of every human you murdered. You destroyed our worlds, enslaved our people, and tried to erase us from existence. Today, we return the favor." The Emperor leaped to his feet, his face purple with rage. "You dare speak to me, animal? I am the eternal master of 1,000 worlds. I will grind your bones to dust and use your skull as a drinking cup." His expression did not change. "You had your chance to rule with wisdom. Instead, you chose cruelty. Now face the consequences." The communication ended, and immediately the battle began. The Emperor's fleet launched forward with desperate fury, their weapons lighting up space like deadly fireworks. But the human alliance was ready. Ships moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, appearing and disappearing through space-time tiers that human scientists had learned to create. Weapons fired at empty space, while human weapons struck with surgical precision. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships phased in and out of reality. Weapons that could crack planets fired across impossible distances. Space itself seemed to bend and twist as two civilizations fought for the future of the galaxy. But slowly, steadily, the human alliance began to win. The ships were powerful, but they were fighting an enemy that had studied their every weakness for centuries. One by one, the great warships of the Empire fell silent and dark. Lieutenant Commander Ray Phillips led the boarding parties that fought their way toward the Emperor's palace. The guards fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat meant the end of everything they had ever known. Phillips and his soldiers moved through corridors lined with trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. Skulls of extinct species hung on the walls like obscene decorations. Weapons taken from defeated enemies filled display cases. At the center of it all sat Emperor or on his crystal throne. The massive chair was built from the compressed bones of beings from every world that had destroyed. Even in defeat, the Emperor refused to show fear. "So," the Emperor said as Phillips approached, "the mammals have finally reached me. Do you think killing me will bring back your dead worlds?" Phillips stopped a few feet from the throne. Behind him, his soldiers kept their weapons ready but did not fire. "No," Phillips said quietly, "nothing will bring back our dead, but we can make sure you never hurt anyone again." The Emperor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Then kill me, mammal. Make me a martyr for my people to remember." But Phillips shook his head. "Death would be too easy for someone like you." Instead of executing the Emperor, Phillips activated a stasis field, or froze in place, his body locked in time but his mind still aware of everything around him. "You will be taken to a memorial ship," Phillips explained to the trapped Emperor. "There you will spend eternity watching recordings of every crime your empire committed, every genocide, every act of torture, every innocent life you destroyed. You wanted to live forever. Now you will have your wish." The Emperor's eyes showed terror for the first time in his long life, as he realized his fate would be worse than death. With their leader captured and their fleet destroyed, the remaining forces surrendered. The war that had lasted 500,000 years was finally over. Captain stood on the bridge of the Vengeance one last time, looking out at the ruins of the fleet. Around Prime, ships from dozens of freed species worked together to help the survivors and begin the long process of rebuilding. "What happens now?" Lisa Park asked him. Smiled, and for the first time in years it was a happy smile. "Now we go home, and we help build something better." The humans did not claim the empire for themselves. Instead, they helped create a galactic federation where all species could live as equals. Humanity took their place not as rulers, but as guardians who would make sure that justice was never forgotten. Years later stood on Earth again, looking up at blue skies and white clouds. Children played in parks where monuments honored those who had died so long ago. Schools taught the lesson humanity had learned in the darkness of space, that patience, memory, and the refusal to surrender could overcome even the greatest evil. The galaxy was free, and humanity had finally come home.